imagine this scene for a moment. You've got this ordinary shepherd out in the desert. He's just living his life, quiet, predictable, tending sheep.
Right, day in, day out.
Then boom, something impossible happens.
Yeah.
He sees a bush just burst into flames. But the crazy part, it's not burning up.
It just keeps burning intact.
Exactly. It's this miracle just demanding attention. A sight that's about to completely flip his life upside down in ways he could never, ever have guessed.
A real turning point.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are plunging right into one of the most pivotal, really transformative moments in biblical history, Moses and the burning bush.
And it's so much more than just an old story, isn't it? It's this incredibly powerful narrative. It speaks volumes about, divine calling, but also about very real human reluctance.
And ultimately about transformation.
Absolutely. It's foundational. It explores how just one encounter, one moment can change literally everything.
So for this deep dive, where are we drawing from?
We've got the rich biblical accounts, of course, Exodus, Genesis, even Joel, and we're pairing those with some profound insights from sources like patriarchs and prophets, the ministry of healing, other spiritual writings too.
And something more contemporary.
Yes, a really inspiring modern account called A Transformed Mind, which brings these themes right into today.
Okay, so our mission today, we really want to unpack how a divine call can just completely reroute a life, how God prepares people even when they feel, totally unqualified.
And those surprising lessons that pop up about obedience, about trust, they really emerge strongly from this story.
Get ready for hopefully, some real aha moments as we dig in. You'll see how this ancient event has powerful, maybe unexpected lessons for your own life too.
Definitely.
All right, so before the fire, before that voice from the bush, who exactly was Moses at this point? Let's talk about his life before the call, those 40 years in Midian.
Right, after he had to flee Egypt. He settles down, marries Zipporah, has a couple of sons, Gershom and Eliezer, becomes part of his father-in-law Jethro's family.
Seems like a pretty, relatively easy life, right? A shepherd. Comfortable.
It does seem that way on the surface. And it's easy to think, okay, 40 years, kind of wasted time, just chilling out.
Smelling the flowers, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. But our sources really stress that this quiet period, it was anything but idle. These were absolutely crucial years. Moses was being transformed, prepared for this huge leadership role he had no idea was coming.
Shaped in solitude.
Precisely. And think about this. Something remarkable happened during this quiet time. A kind of hidden talent emerged.
Okay.
Under divine inspiration, Moses actually wrote 2 of the Bible's oldest books during this period.
Wait, really? Which ones?
Job and Genesis.
Wow. So before the Exodus, he's writing Genesis.
Yes, and think about what that means. It wasn't just, keeping busy. This was his own deep dive into salvation history. It was a crucible, really, where his understanding of God's character, God's plan, was being forged.
He's learning about creation, the fall, the flood, the whole backstory.
The whole plan of salvation. It's such a powerful insight. God prepares us not just through, active tasks, but often through quiet study, deep thinking, really immersing ourselves in his truth.
I think he was getting the foundation he'd need to lead a people who needed to understand where they came from.
Exactly. So, the stage is set, Moses is out there, tending sheep, probably just another day.
And then he sees it. The bush. Burning, but not being consumed. That sense of astonishment.
Yeah.
The sheer impossibility must have just grabbed him.
It demanded his attention, and as he gets closer, drawn by this miracle, God speaks.
And the first instruction?
Take your shoes off.
Which isn't just, wipe your feet.
No, it's profound, a sign of deep respect. God's presence right there made that ordinary piece of desert holy ground. It signals the sacredness, the seriousness of this moment.
He's stepping onto consecrated ground.
Wow. And then God identifies himself, not just vaguely, but very specifically. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Ah, okay. So that immediately connects Moses back to the promises made to the patriarchs.
Instantly. Especially the promise that their descendants would inherit Canaan. Moses knew these stories, these covenants. These were his family's promises.
This is personal. And the text mentions the angel of the Lord appeared in the bush. What's the significance there?
That's a crucial point. The term angel here means messenger. But the insight from our sources is that this wasn't just an angel. This was the Lord Jesus himself, the pre-incarnate Christ, speaking directly to Moses.
So God's own son acting as the Father's messenger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Communicating God's word directly, personally. This is God himself initiating this encounter.
A direct divine message. And God makes it clear he hasn't forgotten his people.
No, he explicitly says he's seen their suffering in Egypt, heard their groaning and deep cry. He calls them my people. It's deeply personal.
And he declares his intention, he's going to deliver them.
Out of the hand of the Egyptians and bring them up to a good and large land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the promised land. And then comes the command, the big one.
The really heavy ask. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt.
Just imagine hearing that. You're a shepherd living quietly for 40 years, and suddenly this is your job.
It's monumental. And what's fascinating and maybe relatable is Moses' reaction.
He doesn't just jump up and say, okay, does he?
Not at all. Despite witnessing this incredible miracle, his first response isn't a clear yes, Lord. It's actually a series of almost defensive questions, objections.
Stemming from what he probably saw as pretty reasonable concerns, right?
Absolutely. He seems initially quite resistant to such a massive life change. You can feel his humility, his sense of unworthiness, but also just the sheer weight of this task hitting him.
A real moment of personal struggle, even right there in God's presence.
Definitely. So, excuse number one.
Who am I?
Yeah. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? He's questioning his own worth, his capacity, and maybe remembering his past failures.
Right. He tried to help before, kill that Egyptian, and the Hebrews basically rejected him then. Why would they accept him now?
It's a valid fear from his perspective. But God's answer isn't about boosting Moses' ego.
What does God say?
It's simple, but so powerful. I will be with you.
Not you're qualified, but I'll be there.
Exactly. Moses feels totally inadequate, and God doesn't give him a list of skills or a detailed plan. He gives him his presence. This is that Emmanuel idea, God with us. And the implication is his presence isn't just comforting, it is the complete solution. It makes Moses' perceived lack irrelevant.
Wow. And he gives a sign too, right?
Yes, he says, as proof, when you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain, on Mount Sinai, the very place they're standing.
Okay, so Moses pushes back again. Excuse number two.
What is your name? He's thinking about the Israelites. What if they ask, okay, which God sent you? What's his name? He's worried they won't recognize God's authority through him.
A legitimate concern about establishing credibility.
And God's response is just iconic.
I am who I am.
Eheje, eshe. It signifies God's eternal nature, his self-existence, his transcendence, but also his active, immanent presence.
It's not just a title, it's a statement of being.
Exactly. And it connects to the name Yahweh, the Lord. While the name might have been known, God is revealing its deeper meaning here. This isn't just Elohim, the mighty, transcendent creator God, but Yahweh, the personal, covenant-keeping God who intervenes, who acts with love and power.
So when God says, I am, it's a promise.
It's a promise of his constant active presence and faithfulness. For Moses, telling the people, I am sent me, wasn't just giving a name. It was proclaiming this truth about God's character and his plan to save them. It's powerful.
Okay, but Moses isn't convinced yet. Excuse number three.
What if they do not believe me or listen to my voice? He's still worried about being rejected, maybe remembering that past experience.
Still hung up on his past failure, perhaps?
Could be. So God gives him tangible proof. 3 miraculous signs.
The staff.
Right. Throw it down, it becomes a snake. Pick it up, it's staff again.
Then his hand.
Put your hand in your cloak, pull it out, it's leprous. Put it back in, pull it out, it's healthy again, instantly healed.
And the thirst.
Take water from the Nile, pour it on the ground, and it will turn to blood. These weren't just tricks, they were undeniable signs of divine power, meant to convince both the Israelites and, eventually, Pharaoh.
Concrete evidence. Okay, surely now Moses is ready.
You'd think so, but no. Excuse number 4, and this one, I think a lot of us can relate to this one.
What is it?
Oh, my lord, I am not eloquent. I am slow of speech and tongue. He claims he's not a good speaker, maybe out of practice with Egyptian or even Hebrew after 40 years shepherding.
The I'm not good enough at public speaking excuse. So relatable.
Isn't it? And God's response here is, well, pretty direct, a powerful rebuke, almost.
What does he say?
Who has made man's mouth, or who makes him mute, or deaf, or seeing, or blind? Have not I the Lord?
Wow. Basically, I created speech itself.
Exactly. And then the assurance, no, therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. God, the Creator, will empower him. It's not about Moses' natural skill. It's about God's divine enablement.
Okay. 4 excuses, 4 powerful promises and signs. Surely that's it.
Nope. One more, and this one is audacious.
What does he say now?
After all that, Moses just pleads, "Oh, my Lord, please send someone else."
He just flat out refuses. Wow, that's bold. Almost telling God what to do.
It's a really profound moment of resistance, and the text explicitly says, "Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses."
You can understand why. The mission is urgent. God has promised everything needed.
Exactly. But even in that anger, God's grace is still there. And here's a fascinating detail we often miss. God already had a solution in motion for Moses' resistance.
Really?
How? He reveals that Aaron, Moses' own brother, is already on his way to meet him. God says Aaron speaks well, and he will be Moses' spokesperson. God knew Moses would hesitate, knew he'd feel inadequate about speaking, and had already arranged for Aaron's help.
That's incredible. God anticipates the weakness and provides the support beforehand.
It shows God's patience and his commitment to the plan, even when his chosen instrument is, well, deeply reluctant.
Okay, so Aaron is coming. Moses finally agrees, presumably. He starts the journey back to Egypt. But then something really strange and frankly terrifying happens.
Yes. The circumcision incident. It's jarring.
The text says they stopped at an inn, and the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. What on earth is going on there? It seems so abrupt, so severe.
It is shocking. And it's meant to be. This isn't some random divine mood swing. It points to something fundamental that Moses had neglected.
Which was?
The context makes it clear. It was about the Abrahamic covenant, specifically the sign of the covenant circumcision. Moses hadn't circumcised his youngest son.
He, the one chosen to lead God's covenant people out of bondage, had neglected the very sign of that covenant in his own family.
Precisely. As the leader, he had to embody obedience, starting at home. It seems God was making a point. You cannot lead my people if you aren't fully submitted to my known commands yourself.
And Zipporah, his wife, steps in.
She acts quickly, performs the rite herself, then touches Moses' feet with the foreskin, a symbolic act, perhaps indicating atonement, life restored, the covenant sealed through blood. Her swift action averted disaster.
What a dramatic scene. So the lesson here is,
It's a stark reminder, almost violent in its intensity. Perfect submission and obedience are essential, especially for leadership. Neglecting a known duty, even one that might seem minor or personal, makes you vulnerable. God's protection is linked to our obedience.
you can't expect divine protection if you're consciously disobeying a divine command.
Exactly. It really underscores that our whole relationship with God, everything he calls us to do, hinges on our willingness to obey him fully, without question, even in the details.
Okay, so that crisis is averted. Despite the bumpy start, the reluctance, the near-fatal incident, things start moving.
Yes. Moses gets Jethro's blessing to leave Midian.
He heads towards Egypt, meets Aaron, just as God promised.
And together, they go to the elders of Israel. They explain everything, show the signs God gave Moses.
And how do the people react?
They believe. The text says they believed, and when they heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel and that he had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshipped.
So that initial fear Moses had about rejection, it didn't happen, at least not initially.
No, they accepted God's message and Moses' leadership at this point. The path forward was set, even if it would soon get very difficult. Things were moving in, as you said, unexpected ways.
So let's bring this home. What does this whole incredible story mean for us, for you listening right now?
Well, one huge takeaway is how God's call often radically changes the direction of our lives, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It might pull us out of our comfort zones, demand things we never thought possible.
And while it might not be easy look at Moses' struggle, the story suggests it's ultimately the path to the most fulfilling life, the path of real growth.
And that central theme, God equips those he calls.
That's key. When God gives you a task, he doesn't leave you hanging. He provides the necessary gifts, skills, strength, whatever is needed. We don't have to obsess over our own limitations.
Our lack of eloquence, our past failures, our feeling of, who am I?
Exactly. God's presence and his power are the equation. He empowers us for his purposes.
Which really makes you think, doesn't it? Consider Moses' excuses. They sounded pretty reasonable to him, right? I'm not worthy, they won't listen, I can't speak well.
Very human objections.
So the question for you listening is, what reasonable excuses might you be holding on to? What things might be stopping you from stepping onto the path God might have for you?
And how can you learn to trust, really trust that if he's calling you, he will enable you, just like he did with Moses, despite all the back and forth?
It's not just an ancient principle either. We see this play out today.
Absolutely. That story of Mitch you mentioned earlier is such a powerful modern example.
Remind us about Mitch.
Yeah, this was a guy, a tough gang member, who suffered a really severe head injury. Doctors basically wrote him off, said he'd never work again. His mind just couldn't handle it.
A seemingly impossible situation.
Totally. But Mitch did something amazing. He just immersed himself in the Bible.
Mm.
He clung to verses like Romans 12.2, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and Philippians 4.8, focusing on things that are true, noble, right, pure.
And what happened?
His life completely turned around. It revolutionized him, defying all the medical predictions. The doctors were stunned when he not only got a job, but kept it.
Wow.
And it didn't stop there. He became a Bible worker himself, opened his home to young people, mentored them, and saw their lives change too, mirroring his own transformation.
It just shows, doesn't it? God works through us, often despite ourselves. He can transform the most difficult circumstances, equip the most unlikely people.
He really does. Mitch's story is just one example of God equipping the unqualified for his divine purposes.
So looking back at Moses, that burning bush encounter was the turning point. It took him from being this reluctant shepherd, maybe haunted by his past, and set him on the path to becoming one of history's most influential leaders.
Everything else he accomplished, the Exodus, receiving the law, leading the people, it all hinged on his eventual yes at that bush.
Yeah.
His obedient response, however hesitant at first, to God's commission.
Which leads to a final thought, something to really chew on. Just imagine, what if Moses had stuck to his final refusal? What if his last word was, no, send someone else, and God had perhaps let him walk away?
He might have just vanished into history. A footnote, maybe not even that, just a shepherd who saw something weird one day.
Exactly. All that potential impact, lost. Makes you think about our own lives. That journey of trusting God, obeying his call, even when it feels overwhelming or illogical, or way beyond what you think you can do.
It's not just about your own personal growth, though that's huge. It can literally lead to making history, to having an impact you can't even imagine right now.
So the question to leave you with is, what might God be calling you to? And what extraordinary impact could you have if you fully surrendered, got past the excuses, and allowed him to equip you?